Well, it's another beautiful rainy Saturday. So, we're going to do something inside. We're going to make a test light out of a stick. Hang in there. Alright guys, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you needed a test light to check a fuse or whatever? This is for 12 volt, 6 volt, 24 volt, basically DC voltage, not the wall kind. You don't want to use this for testing AC current. It'll make you sad. So, I guess the upside is you can convince your friends that you're so poor you had to make a test light out of a stick. And of course it's raining and nasty out, but I just went out and cut a little piece of a stick off of a beech tree. I've got a zillion of them and I only damaged one branch, so we'll be okay with that. So in addition to your stick, you're going to need a light bulb. And I recommend checking the light bulb to make sure that it's a good one, because you're going to have to do a little work to this before you can use it. You're going to need a little bit of wire, some tape, a nail, some solder, flux, and a couple of tools. But that's about it, and I'll show you how we're going to do this. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to solder a wire to the positive side of this bulb and the negative side of this bulb. And I really need a little piece of sandpaper to clean that up. Just makes life a bit easier when it comes to soldering. Clean things definitely solder better. So, now we've got the ground side clean and we've got our positive side clean. So I don't know if you all do much soldering, but actually I'm using a Weller and my tip is, no, it's alright. Flux paste is a good idea for soldering. It definitely helps make a better connection. And once you're done with the soldering, you really don't want to be, how shall I say, fixing your test light after you're finished building it. So get yourself a piece of wire. I'm just using some old speaker wire I had laying around. Doesn't need to be anything heavy duty. Okay, and then bare one end of your wire. It doesn't have to be a lot of wire showing out of the end. Actually, when you are soldering to the the positive side, the smaller exposed wire, the better. So we're going to warm up this gun for a second. I'm going to get some flux on it. We're going to get the flux on the wire. And then we're going to get that wire hot enough so the solder melts on the wire. You don't want to use the point of your soldering iron to melt the wire. You want the wire hot enough to melt the solder so that you have really good penetration into the wire. And excuse my terrible working conditions. Someday I'm going to build a real workshop. Okay, once you've got your wire coat, and there is a lot of, it doesn't take a lot to coat your wire, so there is a lot of waste. Then we're going to heat up the flux again, and we're going to get it on the positive side of our bulb. And we're going to put a little bit of solder here as well. The gun's getting hot now. And then we're going to solder, if it'll stop wiggling, the wire again, terrible work conditions. The wire to the positive side of the bulb. Give it a second to cool down before you go wiggling it around. And look to make sure that none of your solder is bridging the positive side of the bulb and the ground side of the bulb. Okay, so now we're attached there. So now we're going to want to take a second piece of wire and we're going to solder that to the ground side or negative side of the bulb. And we're going to do that the same way. We're going to get the wire coated, and then we are going to heat up the ground side of that bulb. Now, because we have so much room to work with on the ground side of that bulb, I'm going to use a little bit more exposed wire. And this time I'm going to flatten the wire out so that makes a really nice connection, sort of like that. I'll warm up the old Weller again. And then we're going to coat this. Actually, let's get plenty of flux on that. So that's how we want that to look. Next, we're going to fight with this to keep it where we want it so it doesn't move all over the place when we're trying to solder it. So maybe we'll weight it down like that. And we'll get some more flux going. We'll get that on the bulb. That should be sufficient. And then we're going to get this pretty good and hot. I'm going to hold the solder near the point of the soldering gun, and once it starts to melt on the metal of the bulb ground, we're going to be good. It's probably going to take a little bit because there's a lot more material to heat up to melting point. Okay, it's starting to go now. Still needs to be hotter though, but it did melt on there. So we're going to spread that around with the point of the soldering gun, and then we're going to lay our, I believe they call this tinning, our tinned wire. And this one might take a little more patience. I'm keeping the trigger pulled non-stop, and this Weller's a pretty good gun. So now we're going to try and hold that real still so that we don't screw up the connection. Give that a second to cool, and it's going to take a bit longer to cool because there's more surface area, of course. Alright, we should be good. Alright, so there's our bulb with our lead soldered to it. And the only pain in the neck about this kind of test light is if you have to replace the bulb, you've got two options. One, throw the test light out and go buy one with an easy bulb to replace. Or two, go through this soldering procedure again. But if you're stuck at home and the nearest store is a million miles away like it is for me, then this is a definite alternative, especially if it's nasty out and you got nothing else to do. I'm going to use one of my rigid batteries here to test this bulb and make sure it works. And I believe that's negative and positive. Okay. Alright, so we know that works. So, now what we're going to do is we're going to tape up this bulb, which is still pretty blinking hot, to protect the connections and to make sure nothing bridges that connection. So once your if you got a good solder joint, they really are pretty resilient. So I'm going to bend both of my wires down like that, and then I'm going to start right here, and I'm just going to wrap this bulb just a couple of times around, like so. Then I'm going to cut the tape. You can pull it to break it, but what happens is the tape stretches, and when you fold it over in a short amount of time, that tape is going to stretch back to its original length, and it's going to pucker up and look like, not look pretty. I guess not that it matters that we're making a test light with a stick. So then I'm going to take a short piece and I'm going to put it in here. Like so. And that's just to, again, prevent a bridge. Not that it'd be a big problem, but you may get a false reading. And if you're checking something and you're already aggravated because something's not going right, then you're going to get more aggravated. Alright, so we got that pretty well sealed up and hidden. So now we're going to take one final piece. This one's going to be a bit longer. And I'm just going to tape up these wires. And you can get as involved with this as you want. Again, I'm just doing this because I want to do this. Okay, so what I always do after I mess around with connections and so on is I always double check to make sure that it still works when I'm done. And it does. In this test light, you're going to know if you've got power because you're going to go blind for a second. And here's the cool thing about these little 12-volt bulbs is they're going to work no matter where you have the negative and the positive. You can hook these up backwards, it doesn't matter. And actually, I'll illustrate that. So on this battery, probably can't see, but this is the positive and this is the negative terminals. So you see the bulb is working. Now we're going to switch them. And ta-da, the bulb still works. And that's how you can use a test light to check for a draw. You can use a test light to check for grounds, obviously power, fuses, circuit breakers, and we're probably going to do a little video on that as well. So, now that we've got that done and we're sure that it works, we want this someplace at the end of our stick. And boy, this is beautiful. And we're going to tape the snot out of this to the stick so that it stays relatively put. And again, this stick is wet, so I'm going to tug on the tape pretty hard. Now I chose a short stick because, believe it or not, I'll probably wind up using this at some point. And the short stick is going to help you get into tight places. And that sucks when the tape falls over on itself and touches, and then you got to peel it apart. And I swear, OCD, because little things like that just drive me up a wall. Okay, so there's the beginning of our test light. Now the nail. Normally what I would do is I drill a hole in here. I would cut the head of the nail off. I would bring the wire down to the right length, strip it, put that in the hole, and I would make the hole just a bit smaller than the nail. Then I would drive the nail in there to make a good contact against the wire. But we're not going to do that today. And I don't think I'm going to have much luck soldering to this, so we're not going to do that either. But what we are going to do is we're going to figure out about how long we need, and that's going to be too long, but it's a lot easier to shorten the wire than it is to add to it. So now we're going to strip quite a bit of this end here. And my crimpers are in rough shape. I've got a new pair at work, so those are the old pair I brought home. And then I'm going to twist this up so that it's relatively tight. I'm not going to get stupid with it. Then I'm going to take my nail, and you know what? I am going to cut that nail head off because it's going to protrude through my tape, and that's going to bother me. Okay, and then we're going to clean this nail up a little bit, just so we make a pretty good contact, that's all. And let's see. Yeah, we've got too much wire there. I'm sorry to put you through this, but I have to fix that. So then we'll expose that again. We'll wind up our copper. And then what we're going to do, and use a small nail, because a very pointy point on the end of your test light's a good thing. Sometimes you may opt to stab a wire when you can't get to a connector to see if that wire is live, and this is going to make it a lot easier. And again, it's 12 volt DC currents, not AC. So we're going to wrap that wire around our nail. So that we have something like that. And if you're doing this, if you're following along, or if you decide to do it at some point in the future, you can try to solder it. I mean, you may have luck with that, but I think that with that particular nail, I believe that's a nail that's not supposed to rust, so it probably has an alloy or something in it that may make it difficult. So once you've got a good connection, you're going to tape your nail down to your stick. And then just to pretty this up a little bit, I'm going to tape up pretty much the entire stick, other than the extreme bottom, of course. And I'm really going to try and pull this tape tight so that everything stays fairly good in place. This wire is going to be the one that you hook to your ground or your positive, depending on what you're testing. So I'm just going to bring that back on itself. If it does get yanked on, it's not going to pull right on the on your solder joint. Now if you have an alligator clip lying around, that's pretty cool too, because you can put that on the end of your free wire. And I'll probably pause the video and go see if I can find one just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about there. Alright, so there's our pretty much finished test light. So I'll be right back. Okay, I couldn't find an alligator clip. I actually thought I had several, but I must have used them. So we are going to make a makeshift alligator clip. Start by taking apart a clothespin, and we're going to need a little screw. Thumbtack would work good too if you had a thumbtack. Geez, let me see if I can find a thumbtack. Try and make this with stuff you probably have lying around. Be right back. Okay, we found a thumbtack. Now it dawned on me that most thumbtacks today are painted. So unfortunately, if that's what you have, you're going to have to get the paint off it, because this needs to make a good connection. So So that'll work just fine. And this is actually a big thumbtack. I'm surprised I found that. So the other end of the wire, if you haven't already done it, you're going to need to strip that. Now this probably would have been better if I left it together. And these are dollar store, I'm sorry, clothespins, so they're tiny and they're not the best quality. And I was hoping to run the wire through the middle of this, but that's not going to happen on this particular one. But that's okay. Maybe it is going to happen. It is going to happen. Maybe not. A little indifferent today, am I? Okay. We're going to leave it through the middle. Then we're going to put a small hoop on the end of our bare wire. And we're going to want to poke our thumbtack into the clothespin to make a connection on this wire. And be careful you don't stab yourself. So we're going to use the clothespin other end to push it in. And it's split anyway. But it's still going to work. So what you're going to want to do is when you're checking your circuit, obviously you're going to use this to connect to your ground and your nail to check your positive. And to test our test light, we're going to go over to the battery on our cub riding mower. Hopefully it's alive. It's been sleeping in the basement all winter, so we'll find out in a second. Alright, so here's our negative terminal on the battery. So we'll connect one end to that, and then we'll check for power on the other side. And it works. And I'll show you something real quick with the test light in case you're not real familiar with how to use them. There's a fuse here, and I don't know if you can see it. I know it's kind of dark over here, but to test a fuse with a test light, you're going to want to touch each side of the fuse, and if it lights up on both sides, then your fuse is good. That means that the electricity is going through the entire fuse. If the fuse was bad, only one side would light up because it would be burned in the middle and would prevent the power from flowing completely through it. And since we're here, show you something else you can do with a test light. If you take the positive side, if you take your test light and hook it to the positive side of the battery, then you can test for a ground. As I said, the bulb will work in either direction. So let's pretend that, I don't know, this spring is supposed to be grounded for whatever reason, and you want to see if it is grounded. You touch it, and yep, it's definitely grounded because it's illuminating the light. So, pretty cool thing about test lights. Testing fuses, checking for grounds, checking for power. And I hope you didn't find this too boring. I just wanted to make this video and show that if you're in a bind and you need to test something out electrically and you have this stuff lying around, that you could do it. And quite honestly, if you were super careful, you probably wouldn't even have to solder if you were good with, say, super glue and tape or a hot glue gun. It would be a less reliable connection and more fragile, of course, but if it needed to get you out of a bind, you could probably get away with doing it in one of those manners. And the one thing I do recommend about a test light is before you just jump in and start testing circuits, always make sure your test light works. There's nothing more frustrating than checking a fuse or checking a bunch of fuses and you think you have no power anywhere, and then to find out your test light doesn't work, the bulb is blown, one of your connections came loose, whatever the case may be. So hopefully this helps somebody out, or at least you find it somewhat interesting. And you guys enjoy your day, have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.